thank you for inviting me to Korea. This is the first time that I've been in Korea, so it's for me rather interesting as well. Let me first introduce myself. I'm René Sol. I don't know where you were laughing about a moment ago, but I'm a veterinarian in the Netherlands, in the middle of Holland. I graduated in 1993 in Utrecht. It's the only university in the Netherlands where you can graduate for veterinarian. I worked since then in the practice. There are 8 vets with 5 assistants on 3 locations. And the main work of our practice is veal, calf and pigs. And we also do milking cows, horses, and we do some companion animals as well. And since 2002 I'm only working in pigs, specialized in herd health, especially of sow farms, in the middle and north of Holland. I'm a member of the Royal Dutch Associations for Veterinarians, and we initiate a board of practitioners because we're not certified by the way the Royal Dutch Associations is working for us at the government. I'm a member of Board of Experts of IKB, a quality system. I understand that you're trying to start up something like that. I was a former member of a think tank from vets in pig farming. And we have, together with 6 other vet practices, a veterinary knowledge center, and we work together to change out knowledge and develop things for pig farming. Enough about myself, I think. We're going to talk today about the management of farrowing, the way we try to do it in Holland. It doesn't say that all farms in Holland or in the Netherlands work in that way, but it should be the way that we want them to work in. So if you go to farrowing, it's a constant cycle. It starts with the pregnant sow. She has to be in a top condition to get a good litter of piglets, and then we start to wean them, and the sow goes back to get pregnant again. So everything in this cycle has to be perfect to work out for that. Something about the figures that we have in Holland, the technical results. These are the last ones from 2012 to 2013. This is about a farm from 500 sows, the mean of several farms. We managed to get pigs per sow per year 29. And the amount of litters per sow per year is 2.38. Repeat breeders is 7%. The litters per insemination is 88%, and the time between weaning and artificial insemination is 5.6 days. Piglets stay for 25 days in the farrowing pen, and the mean cycles of the sows on the farm is 4.0. We managed to get born alive 14, born dead 1.1. Mortality farrowing is 12.5%. Wean per litter 12.2 piglets. Mortality weaners 2.2%. And weight of pigs delivery for fattener farms is 24 kilograms, and we managed a growth of 313 grams a day. That's the growth of a life after born. This is a photo from a sow from a client of me from a few weeks ago. You told them that this got a newspaper in Holland as well, because this is really exceptional. Our target at the end, our target is to wean an optimal litter. And what's an optimal litter? That's the correct amount of piglets, at least as much as possible, with right weight. Uniformity, very important, because if you got a litter with 10 good pigs and 3 or 4 small ones, that's not good. They have to be very vital and healthy at weaning, and they have a high feed intake into the farrowing pen before weaning, for starting up better at weaning. Well, and that's a complex matter to get all things right together, because if you look what makes your litter size, that's how many pigs are born alive and how many die. That's the end of what you keep. Body weight is birth weight, how do they come on the world, and the colostrum intake, feed intake, litter size, that all depends for the weight. Uniformity is also how big is your litter, how do your cross fostering, what is your milk production of your sow. Your health depends on the quality of the colostrum of the sow and the quality of the amount pigs can take, and of course your infection rate into your pens, and especially also your hygiene, because that's directly related to your infection. And the feed intake of the piglets in the farrow pen. Yeah, when do you start? At what day? What type of feed are you giving? Are you giving mesh or dry, or that kind of things are really important. How do you present it? Do you feed it on the floor? Do you feed it in bowls? All that kind of thing. And also the breed is very important, because I have a farm with PIC, with a Pietran boar, and it's very difficult to let them eat in the farrowing pen. They don't want to eat, and if you have another breed, they eat much more easier. So that are all our important things. You can see this is all a very complex thing. So only small things have to go wrong, and then you don't have the quality that you want at the end. Look at all these things apart. If you look to your litter size and uniformity of the pigs that are born, then if you look at the sow, the last farrowing, the last litter that was born, is very important in how your new litter will be. And especially the energy intake from the sow during the last farrowing is very important to get enough pigs and have enough quality. In the Netherlands, we try to make sows in the farrowing pen as much as they can to eat at the end, and sometimes we even feed the last week before weaning. We feed extra sugar, dextrose, for extra energy, and that's especially for the litter that's coming after that. The body condition of the sow after the last farrowing is not good enough, then the next litter won't be very good. So you're trying to get restore. Well, you try to keep the body condition straight, but that's not going to work if you have a lot of piglets from one litter. Then it's not easy to keep the body condition of the sow straight. So that's why you try to give especially the last week, because that's the period when the new eggs are built. You try to get as much energy in it as you can.
모두 이유하고 나서 어떤 것은 발전이 안 좋은 것은 수정을 안 한다고 그랬는데 또 어떤 상태에서 수정을 안 시키는지 관리를 수정을 지금 이유하고 나면 뭐하니?
그 얘기를 물어보니
체평적 바디 컨디션 회복 그게 질문에 들어가는데 수정을 하고 안 하고를 결정합니다.
Well, we test with measurement of the back fat. The bacon, that's possible, and normally they have to decline not more than 4 millimeters in the farrowing pen, but we're not going to 4 millimeters. We're not going to manage that always. For the rest, I know there is a method which PIC uses is feeling the ribs, and they have a 1, 2, or 3 category there for that. But well, there are not many farmers in the Netherlands who let the sow stand and wait for 3 weeks. They're not doing that much. So no, there's not a direct standard for. Well, of course, flushing is very important for your litter size, and for flushing they have to take about 3 to 3.5 kilograms of special flushing feed. And this body condition, that's what he's talking about. When is it so too thin? The body conditions, with a very low body condition, you have to feed more in the first weeks of gestation for condition repair. And you can only restore condition 6 weeks after conception, because later it doesn't work anymore. So you have to get the condition back in 6 weeks after conception.
지금 모두 내 유두가 평균 몇 쌍인지 우리나라는 많아야 칠산 있고 육산 그렇거든요. 많이 나도 유도수가 적은 거.
Well, I think average, yeah. 15, 16.
15, 16.
Yeah. Well, it's still rising. But I think, well, it will be between 14 and 16, but the mean is higher now. 15, 16. And your feed take in early gestation is also very important for vitality of the pigs.
There are some theories. The high feed intake in the early gestation, it makes lose some fetus inside the womb.
Yes.
So how about
That's
your thought?
That's a very old theory. And it's only partly right because it matters for gilts. If you feed gilts in a very high matter after insemination, then you have the risk for losing the piglets. But for older sow, there's no problem. But I think there was once an investigation with these results, and I think they stay a long time going on. If you follow this, then you feed all the sows a higher amount of food because they have to restore body condition. But a gilt doesn't have to restore body condition, so you never come at such a high level of feed intake because he starts with good condition.
How about you? What's the amount of feed, high level?
2.6? I think so, but it differs because it has very much to do with the quality with the quality of feed. So that's very difficult.
저희 같은 경우는 일정 사료 기준이 아니라 먹는 양만큼을 최대한 늘려주려고 노력을 하거든요. 근데 그럼에도 불구하고 먹는 양이 한계가 있어서 회복하는 부분들에서 좀 여러 가지 문제가 있는데 특별히 간경 사육의 사료량을 섭취를 늘리는 방법이 뭐 네덜란드는 다른 쓰는 방법이 있으면
It maybe depends on how much the sows eat in farrowing pen at the end, because the stomach has to do it. It has to do with quality of flushing feed. That can do. Air is important. Do they get enough air? Constant water supply. In Holland, there's still a lot of farms which do not give dry sows constant water, and that's very important. So that kind of things, and maybe temperature of the room can play a role. But normally in flush feed is a lot of sugar already.
그럼 에너지를 약간 말씀하시는데 보통 지금 주는 사료에 에너지 열량값이 얼마나 되는지 그걸 좀
I don't know exact. I'm not a feed specialist, so I don't know. But
Is there flushing feed in Netherlands? Is it a special feed?
yeah, there's a special feed.
Or not the lactation style the same or?
No.
different?
There's a special flush for.
Oh.
Because if you don't have that, you can feed a lactation feed, but you have to add extra sugars. Because what's necessary is that it's not only the energy level of the feed, but you need very quick energy, like sugars, because you want to develop the eggs. Okay, what makes the birth weight of the piglets that are born and the vitality? That's more the feed intake and quality at the end of the gestation of the sow, because the feed the sow takes in then is more given to the piglets and makes the weight. Of course, the length of gestation is very important. If you have early birth, early farrowing, then piglets will be lighter, because the last days they grow very fast. And if you have an infection during gestation, then the quality of piglets will be less as well. If you see the trend in feeding in the Netherlands, and that's more for low-fat breeds like a PIC with high muscle and low back fat. We feed them as high in the beginning, low in the middle, and high at the end. and we try to have the level during the gestation rather low, not getting them too fat, and we try to get as much feed as possible into the lactation period. And it's very important that your feed at the end of gestation and gravidity has enough energy, not only proteins, because they have to build up enough back fat for producing milk into the farrowing pan, because if you got too much muscle and too low back fat, it's very difficult to make milk from proteins from muscle, and it's much more easier for a sow to produce milk from back fat instead of muscle. Dry sows after weaning, they need sugar, and maybe the week before weaning, because you're trying to get as much and as good quality of eggs at the ovaries. That's very important. Then you need fast sugar, but during gestation you don't need fast energy.
그 에너지라는 게 도대체 무슨 뭐 전해질들을 말하는 거예요? 아니면 보통 이제 한국 사람 생각하는 거 라이신 종류나 뭐 이런 종류인데 그런 거 많이 먹으면 뭐 보존하기 훨씬 좋고 이런 게 좋고 막 이렇게 생각을 하잖아요. 보통 한국 사람 생각할 땐 그런 건데 외국 네덜란드 생각했을 때 그 에너지라는 것이 한국이 생각하는 그 라이신의 그런 따로 특별히 이렇게 첨가해서 넣는 게 있을 거 아니에요. 그런 에너지를 말하는 건지.
No, I'm not a feed specialist, so I don't know exactly what they put in it, but I have the experience that if a sow, you look at it and it looks very good, but if you're going to measure the back fat and it's too low, then it's very difficult to make milk in the farrowing pan. I have the experience that if they feed a very luxury gestation feed with high amino acids and proteins and less energy from fat and that kind of things, that you have a risk that your sows build up too much muscle and too low back fat. And then it's difficult to make the transition in the farrowing pan to making milk.
How about the end of gestation, the mixed with the lactation feed? Is it possible?
To mix?
To mix gestation feed or lactation feed, increase the calorie.
No, because the ingredients of lactation feed are, well, yeah, but they also they have a goal to production of milk. So you shouldn't do that during the gestation.
Okay.
You can mix a little bit about a week before farrowing. That's possible, but not during gestation. But you don't need that much of energy, eh? It's not that you have really high. That's not necessary. The only thing is your feed should be balanced for energy and proteins. Okay. And if you have a race like a Pietran with has a lot of muscle, then you need a little bit more protein than if you have another race. So it has to be very well balanced. The only thing you have to watch for is that you have enough back fat for milk production. That's all. In the Netherlands we use Topics 20 and we try to get 17 to 18 millimeters on the sow before farrowing. And I think a PIC should be a little bit lower. If you talk about infections, what can happen during gestation is of course PRRS, we all know, early birth, weak piglets, small piglets, sometimes small litters. Circovirus can give the same problem, less quality of pigs and also repeat breeders. Parvovirus, repeat breeders and often mummification in all kinds of age. So you can recognize a parvo infection very good at the difference between the size of the piglets, the mummies. Influenza is different. They can give problems to the quality of piglets, but it's more because of the fever that the sow makes, because the influenza virus cannot come into the uterus, so cannot infect the piglets. These three can all three infect the piglets into the uterus. So now we are going to start with farrowing. There are a few things very important, and that's that the sows get 1 week before delivery into the farrowing section. This is especially very important for gilts because they make a lot of stress, because it's the first time they come into the farrowing pen. The first time they are standing alone in a crate without other. They are pregnant, so that's a different situation. Often other feed, thus you have to try to get them a week before farrowing into the farrowing pen. You have to wash your sows with shampoo or liquid soap and flush them with water, and if possible you use warm water, because otherwise in winter sows get cold. This your unit has to be clean and well disinfected. That's very important, and after disinfection it depends on the disinfectant you use, but you have to flush it with water, and you have to take special care for your feeding bowls, that they are flushed with water as well, because if piglets start with eating disinfectants, it's not getting better, I think. Very difficult point is the transition of the nutrition from gestation feed to lactation feed. This, feed stays difficult, so, but some farms start 5 days before farrowing with lactation feed. Some try with 3 days before, some feed gestation feed until farrowing. You have to look to the sow, look to the udder, and you have to depend it on that how you feed. Yes. Most farms change at once, because that's easy. What about labor? And some farms try to mix a few days, and you start with the most easy way on your farm, and if that doesn't work, then you're going to try something else. But it's very important that you look at the udder and that you look at the manure of the sow, because it has to stay soft. It's getting hard, then something goes wrong in the intestine, because if the intestine falls still, you get a lot of endotoxin, and a sow is not fit anymore then. About the climate, that's a very difficult thing in a farrowing pen, because you have the sow who needs fresh air, you have the pigs who need warmth. So what we try to do is warm the nest with floor heating or lamps. The unit has to be about 24 degrees at the moment of farrowing, and after the last birth you bring temperature to lower 21 degrees, because the feed intake for the sows. And the sows we try to bring fresh air through pipes or under the ground. A big problem is the temperature of the incoming air, also through the pipes of the sow. And in winter it's often too cold and it's falling too hard, and also you don't ventilate too much because of the temperature. Air is coming very fast out of the pipes, and what we do then is put a hair net, which you put on your head, on the pipe with an elastic. Yeah, well, it works very good. And well, you have to make sure that you put all pipes, because if one is falling off, then all the air comes through that pipe, and that's so there's a lot of fresh air, so you have to arrange that. Okay, and the very important things with this system is that the pipes above the ceiling are all at the same height. Then we start water supplying for sows. We start 1 day before delivery, after the feeding in the morning. After the sow eats his meal, we put the bowl half of water, so the sow it's very easy to drink, because they need a lot of water, but they are not that fit anymore because they're high pregnant. So that way you make it easy for them to drink and get enough fluid in. Keep giving water for several days, also after farrowing. And it's very important that the nipple gives enough water. 1.5 till 3 liters per minute. It's very important that you remove the manure of the sow, because It's really effective for piglets if they are born already in the manure. That's full of streptococcus, E. coli, Clostridia. Everything a pig needs for an infection is into the manure. So you have to start with removing it from day 113, and then every day, not only once, but every day till birth. Okay, you can put lime or sawdust in the nest, or you can mix lime and sawdust. I don't know if lime is the good word, but you can transfer calcium. And it's very important that you evaluate the udder, the tension, color, edema. There's a lot of fluid around the udder. There's no, it looks like a big udder, but it's not a lot of milk in it. There's, if you see it and it's lying on the slotted floor, you see. You can see it. Yeah. When we filled in all that, we are ready for birth. I don't know if you use a lot of partners induction here with prostaglandins. The advantage of that is that you got all sows together at birth, so you got more sows to divide your piglets with. It's very easy with labor because you can treat all piglets together. But the only thing is you have to look at the quality of your piglets, because if you induce too early, the quality of your piglets will not be good. A lot of bigger farms use it because of labor, and the personnel or staff is easy working. Okay, but if you wean on Thursday and you use partners induction, you have all your litters before the weekend, so most of the work is done before the weekend. Well, you have. And that's one of the advantages of partners induction, because you know when sows start with birth, so you can be there at the moment. And attention at birth is one of the major things to get your stillborn, your dead pigs, as less as possible.
그런 경우가 이제 분만 날짜가 하루만 지났으면 괜찮은데 2, 3일 지났을 경우는 안에 새끼가 자란단 말이에요. 자라. 그러면은 어떤 분들은 하루 지나서 안 나오면은 유도분만을 하라거든요. 왜냐면 새끼가 커면 사산이 많이 나오니까 그런 문제점들이 많이 도래가 되거든. 3, 4일 지나고 엄청 커버리잖아요. 새끼가 속에서. 그런 문제점들.
You have to look into your management system. What's the mean day that sows start birth? If that's 116 or 117 days, you shouldn't start with partners induction on day 114. If the mean of days at birth for your sows, but you can also look at the card of the sow, and if it shows that he's always late, then don't start too early. And you can see if you are too early, that the quality and the vitality of the pigs, you don't use it with gilts, because you don't know. See it if they are too early, because what I said, they don't dry up. They don't dry up, and the sow is not yet ready. So your colostrum production is not good at that moment. So these are two things where about the quality of the pigs not good. Too less colostrum and less vitality. It's very important that piglets come in a good environment, so you can use a birth mat, warmth lamp. You can hang a lamp at the end of the sow, behind the sow, to warm up your slotted floor there, to get warmth to the pigs. You need 2 lights then for each pen. One at the back of the sow and one in front of the nest. You have to control your partner's process, and you can do that by being often there. And if you look at the individual card, you can write down at a certain moment how many pigs are born, and you put on the time. So if you're coming back later and you see that there are no pigs more, so you can give birth assistance. Yeah, pick them out. Yeah, and if you have seen that there are 5, 6 piglets born, you can give them a stripe, mark them, so you know what the firstborn are, so you can use that later in split suckling or that kind of things.
난산이라고 생각할 우리가 진단을 할 때 몇 분 경과가 되실 때 난산이라고 저치돼야 됩니다.
How long?
30 minutes between 2 piglets.
옥시토신을 주사했을 때 때 30분이에요. 주사 안 했을 때 30분이에요.
You have to use the assistance first, because if there's something wrong into the uterus, if there's a piglet lying not good, and you use oxytocin, everything pushes together and nothing comes out. So it's better to use birth assistance and then use oxytocin. If birth stagnates, you try to use birth assistance and then you use oxytocin, and long-acton is the same as oxytocin, only it works for a whole day.
It also if we use the longaton,
Yeah.
we use the milk also.
For the milk?
Yeah.
No, that's no problem.
No problem.
No.
Why? It's the smooth muscle is also.
No, because the long-acton is not constantly on a high level, but it does this. Now you don't have to use this for all sows, because then you have a problem. You have to change your feet. Because this is just an incident. And we use for light and not vital piglets after birth. We have a product called Lianol. It's a potato protein. It's not pure energy, but it's a protein that makes a signal in the brain of the piglet to go faster to the udder and drink itself, so it gets its energy from the udder. No, don't give them potatoes. I don't know for sure it's from potatoes, but they told me it was from potatoes, so don't give them potatoes, because that's not going to work. If you have done this in the proper way, then you look on Monday, and if you see thin piglets, then you have to make another foster sow in the same way, because that's the moment. And if you do that really perfect, there won't be any thin pigs. So that's very important that you look a few days later, and if you see thin pigs, make a foster sow. Not pick it up and put it to another sow, but you take all the thin pigs from the pen and you make new foster sow again. Well, to resume from yesterday about the colostrum intake, this figure shows how fast the amount of antibodies in the colostrum decreases after hours after the first piglet is born. So if the first piglet is born here, you can see how fast it decreases. So you can see how important it is that piglets will start at early time taking in colostrum. You can see that in 6 hours after birth, the colostrum already has half of the antibodies than the first piglets. So the first tip is about the temperature, of course, in the heating lamp. The nest of the piglet should be about 32 till 35 degrees, and that's very important because piglets have to dry up fast. Then the second, you have to you start in time with your birth assistance, because the longer the birth process is during, more energy for the pigs it costs. So pigs come less vital if they take a long time to get birth. You have to between 20 to 30 minutes in between two piglets, otherwise you have to start with your birth assistance. The piglets that are born at last has less time, less chance for survival. They die at first. When piglets are born, pay attention to the activity of the piglets. If they are too slow, not vital, then you have to concentrate on that piglet. You give them something, energy, or the Lianol we talked yesterday about, to get them faster to the udder. So concentrate especially on that less vital pig. With the extra effort you make on that small piglet, you can give them a much better chance to survive. Here you can see what does temperature of the environment on the little piglet. The red line shows the body temperature of the piglets when they are born in a nest with sawdust and a cover above it, so in a warm environment. And the green line shows the body temperature of the piglets after birth when they are born on a slotted floor, a cold floor. You can understand that it costs a lot of energy to restore temperature. So you can prevent this by using a birth mat or using a lamp behind the sow for warmth. Body temperature decreases like this, your piglets will be much more sensitive for diarrhea and that kind of thing. The fourth is about what we just talked about, the last born piglets, a longer birth process, less energy, and you can give them extra energy or give them Leonol. The fifth one is put the piglets to the udder. You can put them on a teeth so they can drink faster. The sixth one is to avoid stress as much as possible. So no treatment on the first day, just let them drink colostrum. The only thing you have to do is teeth grinding if that's necessary. Very important, the seventh, is that piglets has enough space, because if your farrowing pen is really small, piglets can't move freely, and you have a bigger risk that they die of trauma from the saw. And especially the crate, the bars from the crate shouldn't be in front of the udder. Number 8, about split suckling. Sign the firstborn piglets, and you can put them behind a bar or in a barrel 1.5 hours after birth, and you can put them back at the sow 3 hours after the last pig has born. So you can put the piglets together again after 3 hours after the last piglet is born. Okay, and if you have doubt about the intake of your colostrum, you can. There are methods to look if they took colostrum. You can take blood samples for the amount of antibodies into the blood. There are methods for, or you can weigh the pigs at birth and 24 hours later, and they have to gain weight about 100 to 200 grams in 24 hours. And the last is pay a lot of attention during farrowing. The only way you can put the other 9 points in is when you are present at farrowing. If you're not there, you can't do anything. Just wait.
특별히 그렇게 허약해서 결국 가능은 먹거든요. 허약해서 안 먹는 분들한테 먹이는 특별한 어떤 뭐랄까 노하우가 있으신가?
Well, that might be the piglets which are here, and if you see that body temperature, it's really low. So that costs a lot of energy, because they don't have any energy to suckle anymore. So what you can do is give fast energy, and we have special bottles with large energy to give them to them, and warm them. You can put them in a bucket with hot water if you want. We have special swimming, but they're not used. Yeah, and you have to get them warm as fast as possible, because they don't have enough energy to drink. Don't pay too much attention to the very small piglets.
Yeah.
If they are about 600, 700 grams, don't pay too much attention to them, because they never will be a good fattener as well.
그래서 우유소에서 난 초유를 받아서 냉동시키는데 그걸 갖다 해동을 해서 비자한테 먹여도 효과가 있는지.
It's okay for the energy, but not for the antibodies. For the question she asked, it's also possible to inject cold pigs, not vital pigs, with a glucose sugar solution into the belly. That's possible.
네, 아직 군만은 시작을 안 했는데 엄마 자세서 막 떠들어요. 그런 거는 어떻게?
You cannot stop, but normally there doesn't come that much colostrum out of the sow, so she loses all colostrum. I don't see that, but if that's happening a lot, then something goes really wrong with your feeding, I think, because you have too much swelling of the udder. So otherwise the sow is not ready. But you will always keep some sows with problems. It's not easy to solve. But if you never have a sow with an udder that's too swollen or a mastitis, your level of feeding is too low, because sometimes you should have that, because you're always trying to search for the limit. We are starting to use in the Netherlands afleidingsmateriaal, some material for the sow to make a kind of nest. They hang in a bag of jute. Kind of bag. Ideally, if you can use cooling for the shoulder of the sow. You can also use a balanced floor, which is coming up and down from the sow. I don't know if they know that here. Yes, and it's very easy with treating piglets, because you put on the sow to the height, so you have the piglets on the side, you don't have to catch them anymore. So that's really easy. You can decrease your mortality by trauma from the saw with a high percentage. You can use a camera or a phone, but I haven't seen it in Holland as well. Here you can see what happens with the antibodies, and it depends on the disease how long they stay. You see them after. It's the passive immunity, that are the antibodies from the colostrum. You see they rise really fast after intake and then start decreasing from that. Only the way in decreasing depends on the disease. And if you look at PRRS, for example, then you, between 3 and 5 weeks after birth, the antibodies are gone. APP can last for almost 10 weeks, and influenza can last longer. But it depends on the disease how long the antibodies stay into the piglet. So that's very important at weaning as well, but it depends at the disease, because for PRRS around weaning most of antibodies are gone. Okay. And you see here the start of the active immunity, and that's caused by infection of the piglets itself, and they're starting to buy antibodies for itself. Okay. So the only antibodies the piglet has after birth is the ones from colostrum, and the rest they have to start.
그럼 지금 저 그래프는 PRRS나 다른 질병 사망하가 아니고 그냥 정상적일 때. PRRS나 아까 얘기했던 어떤 다른 호흡기 질병 같은 게 있을 때도 능동 면역이 생기는데 별 지장은 없는지 물어봐요.
Well, that depends on the moment the infection starts place. At this moment, piglets are most sensitive because you have less passive immunity and less active immunity. So here, so you can understand that piglets are most sensitive at the moment of weaning. For PRS, it can start at 4 weeks. So they are much sensitive at that moment from weaning. But what we see in the Netherlands is by putting up a level of management, hygiene, biosecurity, better feed, better way of feeding, is that we don't need the antibiotics anymore, because a lot of farms go well without using of antibiotics. Before, when we still were able to put antibiotics in feed, I had a lot of farmers who had constantly trimsulfa on the feed for the piglets, for streptococcus and that kind of things. But I don't have any client who do that at the moment, and it's still going well.
규모화된 농장들 파티를 이렇게 담당들이 나눠져가지고 그 부분만 이렇게 관리를 하니까 별 문제가 없어요. 자단방역도 되고 이제 관리가 잘 돼가는데, 이제 그 삼천도 이하농가, 삼천도도 이하농가들은 이렇게 관리 파티들이 정해진 농장들이 별로 없거든요. 그래서 내가 물어본 거예요.
Yeah, well, but it's all about the change in your mind and another way of work, because it's all about this picture. You spread the infection, and you should think about that. Yeah, well, but it's a few years ago in the Netherlands, they didn't work in this way as well. But I got a farm now with 2,000 sows in 3 layers, and they work with gloves, overshoes in every pen. They switch needles, all that kind of thing, and they have really no problem, no sickness. You should think about what you could do if you couldn't use antibiotics. And the matter with antibiotics is that it only works for a few bacteria, but also your viruses and that kind of thing you cannot stop. So you start vaccinating for what? For every disease there is. Well, the costs will be that high that it's not economic to do that. So that's a problem. So if you start thinking about this and how you can overcome that the disease is spread, you start working in this way. You shouldn't think that you reach this moment in a month or something like that. You will be here maybe in a year or 2 years, but if you don't start it, you never come there. That's the problem. You have to start something to get it better, and it's going to cost you a few years. But what you should do is you start with changing your management, and in the same time you still use your antibiotics, because you cannot stop at once with your antibiotics. So if you combine these two, you can maybe stop in a year with using your antibiotics, and your health of your pigs will be much better. But it's the same in the Netherlands. It's not easy. If you can build tomorrow a new farm, it's much easier to put all these things in. But if you have, we also have farms where farrowing pen, weaning pen together. Yeah, how can you manage? That's very difficult. We have the same problem. Always very difficult to get things, diseases from your farm. It's easier to bring them in than get them out. If you look to sows, you can get free from PRS. That's possible, but you cannot get free from APP or mycoplasma, that kind of things. It's possible, but you use a lot of antibiotics and there are a lot of measurements you have to take then. But those are very difficult diseases to get rid of. That's the problem. If you buy, for example, clean gilts from APP, you put them to your sows, they will be positive in a week or 2 weeks. They will be positive. But do they think this is a logic story or not? If you don't believe in it, you're not going to manage. Well, you just have to start with doing the things which are possible. No one expects that you put your barn down and build a new one, because we can do that in the Netherlands as well. So. Your mortality is very important. We manage the mean in the Netherlands, I showed you before, was 12.2%, and it varies between 7 and 18%. But some farms manage only 7, some farms have 18%. It can also depend on the breed you use, because if you use a Pietran boar, you got more mortality. Mortality is especially trauma, non-viable, low birth weight and starvation. That should be about 90% of your total mortality, and the rest is not that important. These first 4, they all come together, because if you have non-viable pigs, they make much better chance to die from trauma. I look at all things apart, then the reason of trauma is always your vitality of your pigs, but also the vitality of the sow. If the sow is not in a good condition and she starts laying very fast or sitting on her back, then your chance on trauma is much bigger. Also, your housing is very important. Your quality of your farrowing pen, what you just showed, if you use a balanced floor, your mortality from trauma is much lower. And also, if your farrowing pen is larger, pigs have more space, your chance for trauma is also smaller. And your climate is also very important, because it determines where the piglets are lying. So if it's too cold in the nest, piglets should be lying towards the sow, and your chance for more trauma is much bigger. Your management, you can do something about it, locking up the piglets when feeding the sow. Your chance for traumas is lesser, and the behavior of the sow is very important. That's what's also to do with the vitality of the sow, because if you have a lot of mastitis and piglets start suckling, it's painful for the sow. She stands up and lies down, stands up, lying down. So you have a lot of restless sows. You should look at your feed and your feed intake of the sow. Breed is important, because some breeds will give more non-viable pigs, larger litters with more small and low weight piglets. The nutrition we talked about yesterday of the sow is very important for the birth weight of the piglets. Okay, length of gestation is also important, because if piglets are born early, they are less viable, then the gravidity is longer. If piglets are non-viable because of infections, that's the same reason for trauma, of non-viable. We talked about the management of the attention during the birth process, the partus process, and the temperature, and using a birth mouth to prevent the low body temperature of the piglets. So leg weakness, I don't know if there's a lot of leg weakness here in Korea. But if it's in the front legs, don't pay attention, because it's not going to work there. And the nutrition of the sow is very important. At the start of gestation, it's an important time to prevent it. At the end of gestation, it's very important there's enough amino acids in the feed of the sow. Important for the development of the muscle of the piglet. And what they sometimes do, they add extra fish oil or salmon oil at the end of gestation to the sow. Well, temperature and cooling down of piglets is very important, because if they're born too cold on the cold floor, or on a smooth surface, if it's too smooth, then you can get more problems with leg weakness. So that's very important that they stay warm. Some farrowing pens have plastic nests which are very smooth and they don't work well. So they try to put on lime, calcium on it to prevent that.
Question.
저기 계속 오늘 온도 얘기가 많이 나오는데요. 아까 이제 차도를 35도가 제일 좋다고 했잖아요. 이게 그럼 모던 때문에 35도를 맞춰 줍는 거고, 그래서 보통 보면 자동 구역이 정해져 있는데 이게 바로 분만에서는 걔들이 그걸 못 들어간단 말이에요. 그래서 뒤쪽에 보온정을 켜주는데 그 위치나, 그리고 어제 저기 현장에서 보지 중간에 이렇게 높게 큰 거 켜지면 모던이 더워서 여름 같은 때는 되게 스트레스 받을 텐데 그좀 되게 좋게 켜줄 수 있는 방법 좀 한번.
Yes, the answer. But it's very difficult. The climate in the farrowing pen is very difficult because you want for the sow a lot of fresh air, you want for the piglet enough warmth, and you want the farrowing pen during farrowing around 24 degrees, and then you have to decrease it after the last birth to 21, 22 degrees. So it's very difficult because you have to work with some kind of microclimates for the piglets, for the sow, and the total environment. And that's very difficult. We have some stables with floor heating, and some have the heating also under the sow, and that's not good. You have to have the heating really here, and your heat lamp not too close to the head of the sow, because she doesn't need the warmth, the piglets need warmth, so a little bit to the back.
여기는 난방이 안 돼 있으니까 저쪽 애들은 좀 난방 시스템이고, 저 같은 경우는 분만실에 보통 3개를 설치를 해요. 3개를. 그래서 양쪽 물 보이는 쪽하고 이쪽 등 쪽으로 3개가 일어나서 이렇게 바꿔 놓을 수 있으니까 양쪽에 하나씩 머리 쪽으로 나가게끔 하고, 그 다음에 이제 새끼 나오는 쪽 엉덩이 뒤쪽에다 3개를 켜준다고 하루를 켜주면 돼. 하루만.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. But you can always, if you can't get your temperature for your piglets in the nest, you can always make a cover above the nest. That works very well as well. A cover. Okay, I saw once on an exposition. I saw a cover with a lamp, and it measured the temperature of the piglets below it, and it went burning faster or lower on the temperature of the piglets. It was very beautiful.
우리나라도 발열 보온 상자를 해가지고 온도를 설정해 놓으면 그 온도가
설정해놓으면 떨어지는 게 미월 수준까지도 시스템할 수 있고.
Okay. I was just thinking about the ferritin injection of the sows, what they're talking about. I think it's possible to get more hemoglobin into the blood.
Hemoglobin.
Yes, and a better oxygen transport to the piglets. I think that should be the reason then for the ferritin injection. A week before should be good, I think.
1 week?
Yeah, but we don't do it in the Netherlands, so I don't have any experience with it.
Why
but I think that should be the reason why you give a ferritin injection. Otherwise I cannot think about it. But I think it's rather dangerous because some animals can react allergic on iron injections. So I think it's a dangerous way, but I don't have any experience with it. So another reason for mortality is diarrhea and streptococcus, and it should be a small amount of your mortality. Otherwise, you have a problem. Okay. And that's all due to infection, and we often vaccinate sows for that kind of problem. PED. I don't have any experience with PED. Yeah. We would like to keep it that way. We also have a combination vaccine for E. coli and Clostridium. Sometimes we vaccinate for streptococcus twice the sow. Yeah. But it's very important if you vaccinate sows that the colostrum intake is very good, because it's the only way why you are vaccinating a sow. If you vaccinate a sow, the piglets don't drink any colostrum, then it's totally useless to vaccinate a sow. The colostrum, what you do with vaccination the sows for these kind of diseases, that you try the antibodies in the colostrum get high, but the pigs have to take the colostrum, otherwise they're not protected anyway. It doesn't work there. Well, the colostrum we just talked about, nutrition of the sow is very important, but it has to do with the quality of the colostrum, of course. because and also especially for Clostridium problems, the nutrition of the sow is very important, because the change of the transition of gestation feed to lactation feed can give change in the intestine of the sow for your bacterial culture, and Clostridium may rise through that, so your infection rates for the piglets may rise. Okay, so climate we talked about enough. I think it's too cold for the piglets, you get more diarrhea. Well, the piglet feeding is very important, especially to get your process of weaning in the right way. And very important in this problem is your age of weaning. If you wean at 4 weeks, it's much more easier to get feed into the piglets than if you start at 3 weeks for weaning. So if you have large litters with your sows, you can probably start with milk feeding, always from the second day, never on the first day, because the first day they have to take the colostrum, so never give milk. What you can do is give water with electrolyte or energy, that's possible. And then you have to decide how you start the feeding from that, or if you start with mesh feeding, wet feeding, or dry feeding. Water is possible from the first day, but I prefer second day. Yeah. Then you have to start the rest of your feeding, and then you have to make a choice if you want to start with mesh feeding, make it wet, or dry feeding. You can start with milk from 2 days. And then after, you can keep going on with milk until 9-10 days, but you can start earlier with dry feed or mesh feed. You give the feed to the piglets. You can put it on the floor. I got farmers who just put it on the floor. I don't like that, because I think it's dirty. You can use open bowls. The white ones are the best ones. They take more feed from the white ones than the red ones. The red bowls are not good.
이 네덜란드에서 보면은 입주사료도 주고 대용료도 주고 축사료도 주고 해서 사주까지 이용을 시켰을 경우에 이유시 체중이 네덜란드에서는 몇 킬로가 됩니다.
4 weeks they should weigh about 7-8 kilograms, minimum 7. It's not so important the right age of the piglet, it's the age of the intestine. That's really important, yeah, because it's about the enzymes in the intestine, if they can digest the food they get. That's very important. We come later on it in the weaning presentation, but that's very important. It's all about the enzymes in the intestine of the piglet, if they can digest it, and that's very important. By starting feeding in the farrowing pen, you try to develop the enzymes in the gut of the piglet, so that he can digest it.
저희 같은 경우는 어차피 사람이 관리하고 돼지가 출하기만 잘 크게끔 하면 되는 거 아닙니까? 이 시점에서 좋은 사료 이렇게 아까처럼 물사료 구매하고 해도 정상적으로 올라가더라.
It's not only economics, it is just about your weaning process afterwards also, and your nutrition has to fit the age of the intestine of the piglet. So when you start early feeding, you have ingredients which look like milk, because there's only lactase in the gut of the piglet, so that's the only thing we can do something with. Because if you start with a weaning feed at 7 days, the piglet can digest it. The growth of the piglet should come from the milk of the sow, not from the feed you give. You only give the feed to work towards weaning. That's the only reason. The pig has to grow from the milk. Yeah. But it's possible if you start with mesh feeding, wet feeding, that the weight of the piglets at weaning is higher, then you don't feed anything. That's obvious. But that's only if the piglets eat a lot from it. And pigs who eat a lot from mesh or wet feed or dry feed, they drink a lot of milk as well. It's very important if you start feeding that you start with really little amounts. Feed has to be fresh, your bowls has to be really clean, especially if you start with mesh feeding. You have to clean the bowls before you put on new feed, because that's a lot of work. But if the bowl is really dirty, then you are just doing a wrong thing. Start just a little bit. The ingredients of the first feed, there's a lot of milk, so it's very fast not fresh. So you have to give it at least twice a day. If piglets are starting eating, yeah, you can increase the amount. If you come for the second time feeding, there must be just a little bit still in the bowl, or it must be just empty. So you try to get it maximal into the pig, but not a full bowl. Especially when you feed mesh or wet feed. And when you start feeding, you just put in the bowl in the pen at the moment you start feeding, not directly after birth, because if there's the bulks coming into the pen as new, it's interesting for the piglets, so they start eating earlier than if the bowl was already in the pen at birth.
처음에 그걸 넣어놓으면은 그만해서 왔다 갔다 탯줄 걸리고 잡아요.
Yeah, of course. Okay, but it's very important that it comes new into the pen for the piglets, because it's interesting then, it's something new, so they come to it and look to it and start earlier eating. That's the idea. It's best if you can put the bowl near the head of the sow, because they eat together. That stimulates piglets also for eating. When the sow starts eating, piglets start eating as well. It keeps cleaner there, only you have to watch out that the sow doesn't eat the piglet's feed. And you put it, if you put it backwards of the sow, it gets dirty from urine and feces of the sow and the piglet. So, okay, there are different kinds of feeding for small piglets. You can start with milk. They have feeding companies have some candy flour, milk pellets, weaning pellets. The weaning pellets is for later. Normal feeding in farrowing pen is milk pellets till 3 days after weaning, and then you start with your weaning pellets. But some farms start earlier in farrowing pen already with weaning pellets, so they don't have a transition in after weaning. It's really important that what we just talked about, that your feed is fitting the digestion process of your piglets, in the age of your piglets. Otherwise, they can't do anything about it. So that's very important to make. But your feed company, you can choose between flour, crumb, or pellets. With pellets, they eat more in a short time, and with flour or crumb, they spread it more during the time. The intake isn't lower during the day, but they take little portions, spread more over the day. So if you want to early weaning at 3 weeks, it's maybe possible to start better with mesh or wet feed, because you can increase the intake faster. And if you wean a little bit later, then you have more time. You can just start with dry feed. Any questions about feeding piglets?
네덜란드도 혹시 그 4주 정도 포유시킨다고 했잖아요. 덴마크 같은 데서는 최소 4주를 포유시켜야 되는 게 법으로 정해져 있거든요. 그 밑으로 이제 못 줄이고. 네덜란드도 그렇게 법으로 제정이 된 게 있는지.
It has to be older than 3 weeks. We have some programs for star meat, and there farmers has to wean at 4 weeks as well. If you wean at 4 weeks, you always have some litters which are much younger, because you take them from gilts which you want to wean earlier, and then your mean days get a little bit lower than 4 weeks. If you wean at 3 weeks, you often have piglets which are only 17, 18 days old.
다음 발정을 위해서라도 4주 이후가 좋다고 생각하시는지요?
4 weeks you have less body condition of the sow, because the last week piglets take a lot of energy from the sow, they drink a lot. And if you wean at 3 weeks, then the body condition of the sow is often a little bit better. But sometimes farmers have problems with weaning at 3 weeks with heat, and especially not with heat, but the litter size in total, because they wean early. But normally it's no problem. It differs from farms. Some farms have big problems with rearing that really young weaned piglets. That's the problem. Most of the problem is after weaning. I came client in May 2012, because he wasn't satisfied of the vet he had at that time, so I was lucky this time. And he wasn't satisfied about his vet because he didn't want to give him antibiotics, and I had no problem with it. But this is a very young farmer, and this farm, he started this farm almost 4 years ago. Well, his father has a farm as well, and his father was really looking to him what he was doing, so that was a bit of a problem. He first built a farm for his fatness, and then he built a little bit later for the sows. And in the first time he bought piglets from other farmers, from his brothers, but there were for more addresses at the start into the fatness. And then he started with the sows, and he got a lot of problems, and I was really I couldn't understand in such a short time how you could so many pathogens on one farm. Just before I came there as a vet, he had an outbreak of erysipelas into the south, yes. And no one can explain why that happened, because he was vaccinating for erysipelas, but all the sows get sick. So we had to treat them with amoxicillin. And we started there for 4 times a year, all the sows vaccinating with erysipelas. And that gave a lot of abortions as well. When I came there, we had at the weaners some sections with more than 10% mortality. We had problems with E. coli, streptococcus, pneumonia, and when we took some blood samples, it seemed that he had a lot of problems with PRRS and circovirus. And he was vaccinating at that moment on day 6 in the farrowing pen and day 60 in gestation for PRRS. At the fatness he had about 4% mortality, and it was mostly streptococci, pneumonia and salmonella. In the farrowing pen he had a lot of arthritis with the piglets from streptococcus, and this spring he got dermatitis from staphylococcus. So that's really difficult to treat because it doesn't react very good at antibiotics, so we start spraying all the piglets. The best thing to do is use the oil from the carter of your car, used oil. That works best. Okay. Well, but this has to do with a lack of antibodies for the dermatitis into the colostrum. So normally it takes about one cyclus from the sow. You say 3-4 months, and then it's gone again. So, but it lasts for almost 3-4 months, an outbreak on the farm.
초산동물로 이루어진 농약이 많이 발생돼요. 초산이 많은 농약.
So the sows have to make the infection as well, and they build up enough antibodies in the colostrum. So we started there to focus on the weaners, because there we had a lot of problems, and I think if we can manage this will be getting better. Controlling the PRRS with the weaners, we started vaccinating the sows 4 times a year. We do that with an idle. It's just into the skin without a needle, because you don't need a needle then, and your effectivity of the vaccine is much more better. And the reaction and negative.
Shock?
No, yeah, no, not shock, but your sows react less on the vaccination. Okay, and normally you use for that vaccination 2 cc's of solution, and then with this instrument you only use 0.2 cc. So we started vaccinating influenza as well, and we do that at the end of gestation, because we want to raise up the antibodies in the colostrum so that our weaners and maybe a part of our fatness are still resistant. We worked closely together with the advisor of the feed industry. We started treating the animals and changing the feed and that kind of thing, but we also changed the biosecurity. We started using gloves for treatment of piglets, shoes in the farrowing pen. He changed needles every litter, and he changed his walking line from young to old. We started treating the weaners. We injected them at the weaning with Draxin, very good product, and we used a lot of trim sulfur to.
Trim sulfur?
Yeah, trim sulfur. You know that? Okay, for the streptococcus infection, and then we got the infection rate down. We started circovirus vaccination at the piglets, and we changed the total ventilation system, and we built in heating for the environment for the weaners, because there was only floor heating before. Well, at the same time we changed the income of the gilts. He chose another grandparent farm, and he decided to buy piglets from 4 weeks old at weaning, So they come right away from the farrowing pen from the grandparent farm to him, and he raises him himself now. But the higher level of biosecurity, that was especially for the arthritis, and it gets less really fast, and also for this at the end, because it works on and on through all the piglets as well. We still kept problems with streptococci, so we put Sanacor in the feed, that's butyric acid, and this whole process until now took over a year before we saw a real good effect on the total. And the weaners smaller than 1%, and no antibiotic treatment anymore. At this moment we still have problems with the fatteners. We still have influenza and APP and salmonella to the drinking water. We changed the ventilation now for the pneumonia from influenza and RPP. So I think we fixed this part and this part. Only this part we still have problems, but we have also problems with a new influenza strain. We found that together with the health department. So we have a new strain, and we have very much doubt of if our influenza vaccine is working good enough. He's really happy. How much money he spent?
Yeah, he spent for recovery.
I don't know exactly. I don't know. Not too much. I came here on this farm, I think, for almost a year, every week, to solve the problem, and I didn't charge for that. If you had to pay all my time,
yes,
for me only,
10,000
€10,000. I can show you what we changed in changing clothes and boots, and on what places that we do that, and afterwards we maybe can discuss the farm we visited yesterday, what went wrong and what went good. This is the part where the sows are housed and rice house. Here are the farrowing sections. What he does here is changes his coverall and his shoes, his boots. And when I visit the farm, or any other visitor, I take a clean coverall and put some shoes on, and the only thing I do is change shoes here, keep my coverall, I wear gloves, and when I go to the weaned pigs, which are housed here, I only change boots and gloves, and I keep the same coverall, because we're walking from young to old. That's not such a problem, and at the end of my visit, the coverall goes into the laundry. Okay, and I do the same when I go to the fatteners. I change here before I come to the fatteners.
Or you change it for food?
Change boots and gloves. And what's very important if you make a place to change your clothes and boots, that it is a double couch. You take off your boots here, you step with your socks on the grey, and then put over the other couch and put on other boots there, because then you have a good separation from dirty to clean. The shower is for the sows, not for me. He doesn't have a shower for me, that's the next step. Well, we can discuss what we saw yesterday, what went good and what went wrong there. Does anyone has a comment on that?
방역복을 입는 데하고 그다음에 외출복을 갈아입는 데하고 그 체인지룸이 한 군데였어요. 저기 같은 경우는 체인지 탈의를 하고 샤워를 하고 계속 들어가서 방역복을 입어야 되는데 그게 이제
Yesterday we walked from young to old with the same coverall, the same boots. That's not such a problem. That was good. But when we came back, and also when we started, we put everything, the boots on at the same place where my own shoes stood. And when we came back, everyone came back with his dirty boots towards his shoes, and you walk around everything. So that's not good. So when we started, we had to climb over the couch with our socks, and then put on the coverall and the boots, and then walk on the farm and coming back till the couch and climb over it yet. Tried sometimes to put some radioactive stuff on the shoes on the farm, And then at the end they made a photo of it, and you saw that everyone have been everywhere. So it's an easy way to see, well, although you're not going to work with radioactive material, but you can see that you have been everywhere then. And that's the problem. You should try to change that. Does anyone have questions about this?
Where is the farm enter?
The farm enter, he has a building here before, and there I changed. And he also has a quarantine here for the small piglets that he buys as a guild. And he has a barn there for quarantine as well. And then the older guilds come here.
장화를 갈아 신고 탈이라고 하는 그런데 이쪽에 분만사, 임신사 쪽에 들어갈 때 갈아 신고 그럼 그 외부에서 이동하는 신발은 다른 거가 있겠죠?
동장용 신발은 따로 있고요. 분만사 신발은 따로 있고요. 각 구간마다 신발은 따로 있고 구간 안에서 만약에 분만사에서 그 펜스에 문제가 있으면 그 펜스에 들어가는 신발은 따로 있습니다.
And the farmer changes his clothes as well here. I don't, but he does. Because he's walking around from different sections. Changing clothes costs less than a minute, and I've seen that you can do it very fast. So that can't be a problem. So let's move on to the management of the weaning pig. What we see in the Netherlands is that we have an increased amount of pigs per sow per year. A lot of farms are above 30 pigs per sow per year. So the quality of the pigs is not increasing through that. The age of weaning depends between 14 and 28 days. That's a possible moment of weaning from 14 days, but we don't have farms who do that. But the Dutch law says that it has to be older than 21 days. The weight is very important. What we talked earlier about is what do they have to weigh. What stands there is the minimum weight. So at 3 weeks they must be 6 kilograms, 4, 7, and at 5 it should be 8.5. I have only one farm with weans at 5 weeks. And the infection rate is a very important thing because it's increasing. The chance of infection is increasing with age. So if you wean early, you have a good chance that your pigs are more clean. Weaning is for the piglet a very stressful situation because piglets are, when they are in the farrowing pen, they are normally they are suckling and eating 24 times a day. They have a very highly digestible diet. The milk, dry matter, it has 25% fat, 30% of protein, 25% of lactose. They used to eat all together, dus 24 times a day and all together. And they have the same pen mates, and they are still lying by that mother. So this is your feed intake after weaning, and you can see that on the last day before weaning, there's a high feed intake because they drink about 1 liter of milk and eat some food with it. And after weaning, you have a decrease in energy intake, what is enormous.
Day 2, day 4, day 3, day 4, day 5.
Yes.
They increase.
Yes, they increase.
Yes.
Yes, they have to learn to eat. Well, if you can bring it up to here, that's the best. Yeah, you will have to try to manage that they eat much more. That's very important. And at the same moment, we saw this picture before, you see that the amount of antibodies is decreasing. So the piglet is also more sensitive to infection. So we have less feed intake, we have the enzymes in the intestine which not work very well. We have a decrease in resistance from the antibodies. So the piglet is really very sensitive for everything. Means that they're getting back instead of growing. If you look then at weaning, then you have beautiful pink filled piglets, and after a week they are really thin, pale, small bellies. And what happens with a post-weaning leg? Less feed intake, so less energy into the gut. The stress makes that there's less blood supply to the intestine, because by stress everything goes to the brain, the lungs and the muscles, and not to the intestine. So you get a shortening of your intestinal villi. Into the gut there are a lot of villi, and the villi take care of the digestion of the food, and if they shorten, you have less surface and less possibility of digestion. And that causes a change of, you get undigested rotted material into the intestine, and that causes a change in bacterial culture. If you have that rotted material in the gut, you can get an overgrowth of E. coli, of Clostridia. As a result, you get diarrhea. So how does it look? You get really sick pigs with diarrhea, you got swollen eyelids, you get sometimes a high voice because of the swelling of your voice bands into the throat. Often you find sudden death piglets, and that's because of the toxin production of the E. coli. And if you find these pigs, and you can see on the outside often that the belly is totally blue. How can we prevent all these then? You start with a clean and disinfected section. You have to make sure that it's warm before the piglets come in. Don't let the piglets make the room warm, but make it warm before the piglets come. Make sure that your climate is controlled and checked, that it works well. Put on the light 24 hours. A day for last 3 days. And make sure you have good feed and water supply. We come up there that later. Make sure that your nipples are flushed again, because if the pen is empty for a week or 2 weeks. About the nutrition that's fitting for the age of the pig, I think we're going to go through this quickly, because it's late and we're not fit anymore. But they used for the protein dried skim milk of soy products, and in the Netherlands they use blood plasma at the moment. It's very popular for feeding young pigs. For the carbohydrate you need the lactose, so you're told. And it needs to be really high, 15 to 25%. And they use most of the time dried whey for that, or you can use some corn flour or oat flour. They don't need much fat, so the fat has to be really low. But if you make pellets from products with milk in it, you need some fat for pelleting. So they use mostly soybean or corn, or soybean oil or corn oil. Yeah. And you can make use of some growth promoters. Copper sulfate, zinc oxide is very good. Also for preventing E. coli and streptococcus, but we are not allowed to do that in the Netherlands. In Denmark they use an awful lot of zinc oxide. Don't do that. But we have some farms who use zinc oxide, and it works really well. They just buy and put it on the feed. The feed factory doesn't do it. But we can give some more copper sulfate till I think 14 weeks of age of the pigs, and then it has to be really low. So but the zinc oxide works very well for E. coli and streptococcus infection. Well, you can use antibiotics, of course. Colistin or doxycycline will work as well. And for streptococcus, use amoxicillin or ampicillin, which works really well. And we can use some alternatives into the feed. We use Sanacor and Centigard. That's another product for against diarrhea. But it never works the same as antibiotics, of course. Some things about the way you have to feed after weaning. In start, you have to give 6 to 8 times a day little amounts. Every time you come in the pen, you give new food, fresh food. You activate all the piglets, and you will see that they come together to the pens. So if you don't come there, they start lying down, and they won't be active, and then they won't start eating. You need enough places to eat so they can eat together, because that's what they were used in the farrowing pen. So 1 to 6 places for 10 piglets is okay. You have to keep the food really fresh, especially if you feed mesh in the beginning, because if it's too old, it's getting acidly, and then it's not good anymore. We put extra pens into extra bowls into the pens, so piglets can eat easily. And you can supply some extra water. You can fill some bowls with extra water, so piglets can drink easily. The temperature at the start is very important. What you see on this figure is the temperature that piglets need when they have. Well, let me explain this first. This is the day after weaning, and this is the temperature that they need, piglets. And it starts with a high level of feed intake and a low level of feed intake. And the temperature needed for a high or low food intake is above 32 degrees. And for a low, high feed intake, it's more than 31 degrees. And this is for a pen with, of a section with a fully slotted floor. You can see here that the temperature after 7 days of weaning should be then almost 30 degrees. So in the start you have to be sure that your pens are really warm for the piglet. You start at 30 degrees and in 6 weeks you can build it back or decrease it to 23 degrees. It's easier if you have a computer controlled pen, of course. Thus, what is very important is the difference in temperature of the incoming air and the temperature of the room itself, because that's the fact that that results in drought, and that's very bad for piglets. This is an example of climate control from a computer, from Stienen. What you do is you put the temperature and the temperature you want to have, and you can decrease it into the computer at the age. And this is also the moment, the temperature where the ventilation started. So you put in your minimum ventilation and the temperature, and then the computer arranges the rest. In the neutral zone here, there's nothing happening, it's just minimum ventilation and no heating, and when the temperature drops, the heating starts to bring it back to the temperature you want. And this neutral zone has to be, normally the advice is 2 degrees, and this is the bandwidth from the minimum to maximum ventilation should be 6 degrees. Well, in the Netherlands we still have weaned pigs in large groups. That's because of costs for building. This is what happens then. You got infected pigs in every couple, and you put them all together. The pink ones are the healthy pigs, and these are the sick pigs. And if this couple is infected with PRRS, and this one has APP, and this one has streptococcus, you put them all together, and before you know, you got a big mix of different diseases. So smaller pens is better. And good isolation is, of course, very important. This one is maybe interesting, how you're handling your sick piglets. You have to treat them in the proper way. If you use antibiotics, choose the right antibiotic, the right type of antibiotic. Make sure that your dosage is all right, and your length of treatment should be all right. You can keep them in a section, in an apart pen, that's preferable. Give them feed and water. Maybe give them some mesh feed and extra warmth. Okay, and there are 2 ways it can end. They can recover, and you can put them back to the others, or let them stay in the pen. And if they don't recover after a good treatment, then you should euthanize them, kill them, because otherwise the infection rate on your farm is still rising.